Hey everybody, Peter Green from Agile for All, coming to you with your daily dose of Agile. Today is Monday, and Mondays are trending Agile days. And the thing that's trending right now, which is something that's trending all over the place, not just in the Agile community, is remote working. With the spread of COVID-19, it's a hot topic with more and more people working remotely and lots of things that used to be done in person being done remotely. The topic is, how do we do that well? How do we do it effectively? How does that impact teams that are trying to take an Agile approach? I think probably the biggest advice I would give teams is to investigate companies that have a lot of experience with this. So, for example, there are companies out there that are fully remote and do it really well. And in order to do it well, they've had to invest time, had to run experiments, had to see what worked in order to get the benefits of the remote culture without all of the potential drawbacks. So there are several companies like this. Some of my favorites include Buffer and Automatic, both companies that write quite a bit about working remotely. And so that would be my first bit of advice for somebody considering what to do when you're working remotely. Buffer, for example, has an entire blog where they talk about their culture, and there's a tag on there called Remote Work. And you can read all about their experience and some of the cool things that they do. I'll just give you one example from Buffer, which is that they rely heavily on Slack as a communication tool, but they set pretty strict agreements around how to use Slack so that Slack doesn't become like a situation where if you're on Slack, it's assumed you're at work. And so they have 10 agreements around how they use Slack. And they have a cool process with how they use Slack, which is that there's a Slack bot called Donut, which you can look up at donut.com, donut.com. And donut.com will randomly pair up two people in the company every week or two and ask them some questions to help them get to know each other. And what a cool idea for if you're not going to randomly bump into people in person at an office. What a cool idea to randomly pair a couple people up, ask them to answer a few questions and get to know each other. And so that's just one example among many at Buffer of what they do to make sure that there's still the human connection when we start to work remotely. In my experience, one of the key things when we're working remotely is that we consider it all or nothing. I think the hardest thing about working remotely is when there is a mix of some people in the office, some people working remotely. And what that leads to is an imbalance in communication bandwidth. If you're in person and there are a few people in person, their bandwidth is just higher. No matter what we do with Slack and Zoom and all of the tools that we have, nothing has as high a bandwidth as in-person communication. And so if you have some team members that are in person and some that aren't, the in-person group will always have a higher bandwidth of communication. So if we're going to make room for remote work, then my belief is that we should treat the situation as if everybody was remote. And so even if you have some folks in the office, assume that they just happen to be remote workers that are sitting in the same physical space. That way we make the same use of tools as everybody else, and a team will start to figure out how to communicate effectively if they're all remote. We have lots of good examples of that. So level the communication playing field, and then study from the companies that have been doing this for several years and see what experiments you can run if you're working remotely. So best of luck to everybody out there that is transitioning to that or experimenting with it. And boy, let's hope that we get over this COVID-19 arc pretty soon. And if you've enjoyed this, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Monday.